Hello and welcome to our section today. We will look at the Bantu people of Kenya. The Bantu speaking people that will be included in this session will include Chuka, Embu, Mbere, Gusii, Kamba, Kikuyu, Kuria, Luya, Makonde, Meru, Mijikenda, Pokomo, and Taita. Kenya's Bantu-speaking people account for around 2/3 of the country's population, yet they occupy less than 1/3 of the national territory. Their land, however, is among the country's most fertile and supports a mainly agricultural existence with only limited animal husbandry. The word Bantu itself incidentally means human beings. There are three main clusters of Bantus in Kenya: those near the coast and in the plains, a short distance inland. They are Pokomo, Taita, Makonde, Taveta, and the 9 tribes of Mijikenda. The Central Highlands Bantu, erroneously called Kikuyu-speaking people of around Mount Kenya and the Nyandarua in the Aberdares range. We have Chuka, Embu, and Mbere, Kamba, Kikuyu, Meru, and various related tribes, and those in and to the north of Lake Victoria, basin in the far west of the country, the Gusii, Kuria, and the various Luya sections. Although each of these tribes shares Bantu as a root language, many dialects and variations are not necessarily mutually intelligible. The Bantu ethno-linguist group is almost commonly said to have its origin in Western Cameroon, although how it's possible to be so certain over migrations that date back over 4 millennia is still a mystery. What is certain is that the Bantu certainly came from the region of Central Africa, from where they or their culture began expanding to other parts of sub-Saharan Africa around 2000 BC. The cause of their migrations are believed to have been the result of an increasingly settled agricultural lifestyle, although needing little land, far less than herding cattle would, had to be fertile and well watered for cultivation to be a viable alternative. Population pressure in Central Africa may therefore have prompted the first Bantu migrations. Several successive waves of migrations over the following millennia followed on the tracks of the first. They were neither planned nor instantaneous, but took place gradually over hundreds and thousands of years, allowing plenty of time for Bantu culture to spread and be influenced by other cultures it came across, either through assimilation or conquest. Bantu culture most likely reached Kenya from the west and possibly the south, sometimes between 200 to 1000 AD, having passed through what is now Congo and formerly Zaire. By 600 AD, they had dispersed over enormous areas covering what is now Tanzania and Mozambique, and on the east coast of Africa, south as far as the southern Africa coast, and west into parts of Angola. The result of all this migration and integration was over 500 Bantu related languages sprinkled around this area of Africa. The history of the Bantu migrations in Kenya itself is somewhat confused, not least because the ongoing process of fusion and mutual influence with the neighboring peoples meant that the tribes we know today did not actually emerge as distinct groups until about 500 years ago at the earliest. And as the Bantu people met and absorbed Other people, they also adopted some of the assimilated people's history and traditions. As cultivators, the Bantu sought out abundantly watered areas, often in the highlands, and were the first to begin large-scale forest clearance and for cultivation, with the result that even today many Bantu areas suffer enormous losses of topsoil each year through erosion. Although the newcomers were frequently displaced and sometimes confused with previous Bantu immigrants, Cushitic people from some pastoral practices were adopted. All the hunters and gatherers they came across, the essence of Bantu identity remained the same, namely the reliance on agriculture and hence a relatively settled way of life. Other pan-Bantu cultural element which have survived, and not just in Kenya, are cosmological beliefs such as the belief in a single creator God and the belief in the survival of ancestors as spirits or intermediaries between the living and God. The Gusii, Kuria, and Luya of Lake Victoria are the descendants of possibly the earliest Bantu groups to have arrived in Kenya and are believed to have introduced iron smelting and the use of iron tools to the region. Although it's obvious that the Bantu must have moved north to populate the areas they cover today in Kenya, the oral legends of the Central Highlands Bantu invariably point to the north, usually the Nyambene Hills, which lie north of Mount Kenya, as their place of origin, that is some 500 of years ago. From here, say their oral histories, the ancestor of the present-day Kikuyu, Meru, Embu, and Chuka and Kamba are possibly others as well, migrated south into the foothills of Mount Kenya itself, where they eventually dispersed to their present location. This would indicate that once in Kenya, the Bantu headed much further north than their present territories and were pushed back by either the Nilotes or Cushites. This theory is backed up by other oral histories which state that the Central Highlands Bantu came not from the north or west, but from the Indian Ocean coast to the east. The coastal Bantu themselves, the 9 tribes of the Mijikenda, together with the Pokomo, are anonymous, and in that they came from a semi-mythical place called Shuguaya in the north, which is likely to have been in what is now Somalia. A long time ago, it seems that many Bantu societies were organized along matrilineal lines and were governed by women. A whole heap of oral legends testifies to this, and female founding ancestors, where they exist in tradition, are as venerated and respected as their male counterpart. Being a settled culture, the Bantu were inherently at risk of attack from the mobile, nomadic, Nilotic and Cushitic cattle and camel herders such as the Maasai, Borana or Oromo and Somali, and as a result, many Bantu societies became characterized by their defensive nature. None of the Kenyan Bantu groups lived on open land, ideal territory for the herders, having preferred for both economic, that is agricultural, and defensive reasons to occupy the less accessible highlands regions. Settlements were built with the greatest attention to defense and were also well concealed. Europeans found they could be walking only meters from a settlement without knowing of its existence. Some tribes, like the Kikuyu, became experts at adapting and adopting to new realities and rarely resorted to conflict. Others, like the Chuka, developed an array of inventive defensive measures ranging from indigenous traps to tree houses and fortifications. Almost all the Bantu groups are adopted as a rigid system of exit, an idea possibly borrowed from the Nilotic or Cushitic peoples they came across, in which all people of similar age were initiated into an age set, which together progressed through clearly defined phases of social responsibilities, functions, and status, from initiations through warriorhood, marriage, and elderhood to death. The system ensured the cohesion of society as well as enabling the development of the warrior system, by which all the young men of a given society would shortly after initiation to adulthood and other age set take up the role of defending the entire society. For the Mijikenda in the coastal hills, the situation was similar, having been pushed south by the Somali Oromo expansion. They settled on hilltops, which offered more protection against the nomadic herders than the lowlands. There they developed specific defensive settlements called kaya to protect people and property from raiders. Nowadays, the Bantu reliance on agriculture and literary trade has meant that they are by far the richest of Kenya's people, at least in monetary terms. The downside is that their settlements are inevitably densely populated, a problem which has grown acute over the last few decades. This is the Afro Dialogue. To hear more of these stories, subscribe, like and share. Hit the notification bell to get notification when we upload a video.